And Pete, to continue, in terms of Everton's third case, I mean, you very briefly mentioned it in there, but what does that look like for them? Are we likely to see a potential, another points deduction for them? And actually, what would be the timescale of this next sanction potentially?
Yeah, obviously, it's not going to be heard before the end of this season. Definitely not. Obviously, the Premier League are pushing for more punishments for Everton for this latest breach, which is obviously the loan repayment or the cost associated with the cost of the new stadium as well. It's only around 6.5 million, so it doesn't seem a lot when you think about it with all the other figures that have been mentioned regards Everton's charges for breaches of PSR. So I think a fine surely should suffice for this one. I think another points deduction would be really harsh on Everton. But yeah, I think we'll find out probably come the start of next season if they are going to face another points deduction or maybe a fine. And I think for such a relatively small breach of the regulations of £6.5 million, I think a fine would probably be the best outcome, I think, for everybody involved.
And in terms of sort of looking at the stadium issue, we know that Spurs were allowed to discount their interest fees as stadium costs. Do you think it's unfair on Everton to actually include them for this PSR calculation? The fact that they could get a potential fine, as you've said, or maybe a points deduction. Actually, is it becoming a bit ridiculous now that everything is so subjective in terms of sanctions?
Yeah, I think it's very unfair on Everton. Everton are moving to a new stadium because they want to increase their revenue and everything else, and that's one of the main reasons why they're moving to this Bromley Moor Dock Stadium, which is obviously going to have more fans, bigger attendances and everything else. So they're sort of being punished for showing a bit of ambition to try and improve their revenue as well. So to get any points deductions potentially for not repaying the interest payments on the move to a new stadium, which again, it all started during COVID time as well, when there was no fans in stadiums as well. I think Everton would find themselves, would feel that they are being harshly treated as well, because if they want to compete with the other clubs in the Premier League, a move to a new stadium, I think, is something they've had to do. Although Goodison is one of the traditional old grounds as well, it wasn't getting enough people in through the door, and obviously that was harming Everton's revenue streams. While the new stadium looks great, it'll bring so many other opportunities on Merseyside as well, around that area with other hotels and everything else. So it'll be great, and it'll look great in the Premier League as well. But yeah, for Everton, if they're going to get PSR charges because of that, because they're showing a bit of ambition and moving to a new stadium, I think that's very, very harsh on them.
And Paul, I know we discussed in previous weeks about Sean Dyche's mentality, the squad, and as Pete mentioned, of course, that they had a really disappointing defeat at Stamford Bridge. What will Sean Dyche be saying to the players now to sort of regroup the team and make sure that they do fight until the end? Because I mean, some fans have started to argue and started to turn on Sean Dyche, and there seems to be more of a split now with that sort of Dyche in and out campaign.
I mean, you look at the defeat. Yes, it was a defeat, but I think it was more so the manner of the defeat and the performance, or the lack of performance. I think James Tarkowski came out at the end of the game and almost apologised to the fans, didn't he, for the way that they played. I mean, you wouldn't expect a Sean Dyche side to be so porous, so susceptible at the back, conceding so many goals so early on. I actually fancied them to go there to the Bridge and get something, because, I mean, Chelsea are literally the ultimate box of chocolates this year, aren't they? You never actually know what you're going to get from them. And, you know, they've turned a little corner at the moment. But I thought the way that Everton play with their set plays, defensive stability, I thought, listen, it's not pretty. Everton are not a good watch at times. But Sean Dyche, there's one thing that you can say for them. They've got an identity. As Everton supporters now, you go to Goodison and you know what you're going to get. You know, you're going to get a certain style of play. You're going to get results. And you give them those points back. And they're sat above Crystal Palace near Bournemouth, 13th, 14th in the Premier League, which is probably the highest finish that they've had for a number of years. So, yes, everything else that's surrounding the club isn't great with the points deductions and, you know, different things, and that they're having to battle against that. And psychologically, you get hit with 10 points, that's a real blow. You get 4 back and 6 is still a big blow, but then you get another 2. And as players and managers, Sean's having to keep going to the well and having to go again and go again and go again. And it's almost, look, what do we have to do to stay in this league? Like I say, you give them the points back and they're quite comfortably mid-table, having a decent season. And I suspect there's a lot of different feeling around Everton, a lot of different feeling around the team going into games. This is a real blow for them, that defeat against Chelsea. This weekend coming up on Sunday against Forest, I'm there, I'm at the game. I'm really looking forward to it, but it's a massive, massive game for Everton. And I've looked at Everton's fixtures coming up. They're playing teams around them. This literally is in their own hands. Where they are in the league now, they take care of their own business. they stay in this league. And it would be incredible if they do with the points deductions that they've had. And I was at Aintree on Saturday for the Grand National. We were producing our radio show from there, doing the football show. And I drove home past the stadium. And it's the first time that I've seen it at the Everton Stadium. It's impressive, really, really impressive. And like Pete says, why are you punishing a team for trying to better themselves, for trying to increase revenue? And in the same way as Nottingham Forest have done, 23 years out of the Premier League, they come in, they've got an owner who is financially able to spend that money. Yes, he's grossly overspent on players. He's signed far too many players, but he's had to do that to stay in the Premier League. So the gap between the big and the small is getting bigger because these teams that are financially wealthy, like the likes of Newcastle and the likes of Forest, who have got owners who want to spend money, are not being allowed to do it. Okay, we know that Everton, the financial situation is not great. The 777 takeover, is that a frying pan fire situation? It could well be with the amount of debts that they've got hanging over them. But with the new stadium, the ambition to increase revenue, yeah, you can do that, but we're going to fine you for doing it. It just doesn't seem right.
And
Paul, quick question. Obviously, going back to one of your earlier comments there, did you back the winner at the National?
No, I got the fourth place. I had a little each way. I mean, it's the hardest race to back. But we were there from 8 o'clock in the morning. It was some day. It really was.
Well, I'm glad you had fun, Pete. In terms of Everton's takeover, relating that to potential sanction, what does this now mean for 777 partners and all involved with Moshiri? Are we likely to see 777 partners take over? Do you have an update on that for us, please?
Again, total uncertainty around this one as well. The takeover, it's been dragging on for such a long time now as well. I think looking at that, if Everton were in a bit more stable, sound grounding this season, I think there would have been serious scrutiny on Sean Dyche as manager. I think was it 1 win in 15. In any other league or anything else, I think there'd be probably a change of manager going on. But with everything that's going on at Everton with potential takeover, they probably haven't been able to make that decision. And I feel that would have been harsh on Sean Dyche if they hadn't done that, because I think he's obviously working under such constraints there with the points deductions and everything. But yeah, it just sums up Everton's season. It just goes from one uncertainty to the next. And the 7-7 partners, I've got major doubts that it will go ahead. Obviously, I think they've had this extension now to try and repay this 158 million debt. So that needs to be paid off straight away. And we've seen and heard some maybe potential horror stories around 7-7 partners and other investments that they've got in football clubs around the world as well, maybe not paying their bills as well. So they have to pass that fit and proper persons test with the Premier League before this takeover can get finalised. They have to show their source of funds that they can afford the takeover, and then have proof of adequate funds for 3 years of their business plan. I just don't see why is it dragged on so long. If the money's there, surely this takeover deal could have went through by now, because it's been one of the longest on-running sagas, I think, of potential takeovers as well. And or maybe 7-7 partners waiting for the worst case scenario of Everton being relegated, thinking we might be able to land them on the cheap. That could be in their thinking as well. I don't know. It's just, I think the club's in limbo, really. And to be fair to Sean Dyche and the players, have done unbelievably well to continue keeping Everton fighting for survival and with everything that's going around the club. So yeah, real uncertainty, I think, just around the club. That's my main point on Everton. You've got the points deduction, you've got the takeover, and you've got results on the pitch as well. And
Pete, if no one then pays that loan potentially, is there a chance that MSP Sports Capital takes charges? Could they, in a worst case scenario, go into administration? What's the likely timeline of this over the next few weeks and months?
Well, worst case scenario would be administration, and there'll be another 9 points deduction. So Everton don't want that. You can't second guess what's going on with these things. It's a lot of money to be repaid. I think there's a couple of local businessmen as well who need monies repaid to them as well. Obviously have helped fund the club and keep the club afloat going right now with this takeover dragging on as well. I think Everton ideally wants 7-7 partners to get the go-ahead to get this takeover done, because Farhad Moshiri obviously wants out. Obviously, he has spent a lot of his own money on the club. I think if you look at Everton under his ownership, they are one of the biggest spenders in the Premier League, but it really hasn't worked out for them. So I think for Everton, they need this takeover to happen, because moving into this new stadium, potentially not being in the Premier League, there's a lot of issues surrounding the club right now. And financially, again, I think obviously their losses were pretty huge again in the latest accounts as well, and I'm sure they might be facing more losses in their next accounts. So, and that could be further PSR breaches and FFP breaches as well, and we all know what that leads to.
Paul, you kind of spoke about Sean Dyche and how difficult it's been for them. Would it be a mistake to let him go, whether they do stay up or not next season? Is it worth keeping him in charge? Or actually, do you think that going into next season, they should potentially look at new management?
You look at the situation that Everton are in, and you look what he's done at Burnley for so long. Burnley are the second most profitable club in the Premier League since, when they've been in it. And you look at the business and the tight strings that Sean's had to work under at that club. I mean, yeah, you can make comparisons, but actually the size of the football club and the history, there is no comparison. But he took a club like Burnley on the budget that he had to 7th place. I mean, Burnley Football Club were playing European football, and he's kept them in that Premier League. Yes, they've yo-yoed a couple of times, but there's a manager there who knows how to get the best out of what he's got. He's not the most fashionable of managers because he's not an international European manager. Will he get offered a different job, or has he been labelled with a certain style of football and a certain way of playing? That there is that way of thinking. But actually, when you're in the situation that Everton are in, the remit is to stay in the Premier League, regardless of how you do it. The remit is to stay in the Premier League, and his man management skills, the staff that he's got around him, the way that he knows the Premier League, and his mannerisms. He's been there, he's seen it, he's done it. I mean, there's absolutely no point in changing the manager now, because I thoroughly believe with the squad that they've got, the manager that they've got, they'll stay in this Premier League. And in all honesty, what Pete's just said there about the FFP and the PSR, there's no light at the end of the tunnel for Everton. This is just going to be ongoing. They'll do well to keep hold of Sean Dyche there next season because of the way that the club is. Who do you want in a situation now? I mean, if hypothetically, if you were to get rid of Sean Dyche now, who do you go and look for? You go and look for somebody like Sean Dyche, don't you? That's exactly what you look for to keep you in the Premier League. So that answers the question in itself. And next season, with the uncertainty, if you can keep him and his staff in and around the club and keep the club in the Premier League somehow until all this goes away, because this isn't a short-term fix, with the third potential PSR charge, with the stadium charge, everything else, it just seems like one thing after another. You need somebody who is able to keep your club in the Premier League, and by hook or by crook, whether it's pretty or not pretty, whether you like the style of football, agree with the team that he picks or whatever it is, with a small squad and a small budget and a team that have got the back against the wall, he's the man to keep them in the Premier League.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.